Hi, I'm David King from The Collaborative. I'm joined by Katie Cusack and Maureen Sager from the Upstate Alliance for the Creative Economy. There's a lot going on, obviously. With ACE, there's always a lot. But you just finished up the culmination of the Creative Capital series for WMHT, and you co-hosted with Guha Bala, and you have this new series of events that take folks around the 8 counties that sort of you represent. So this also comes just as, it's been a few months now, but you guys joined with the, I'm going to get this wrong.
Go ahead.
No, I think you better tell me.
The Center for Economic Growth.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a time for a lot of growth for you, and I'm wondering, first of all, what that change meant for ACE, and if it allowed you to do more.
Yeah. I think what was really amazing about the Center for Economic Growth thing was that we've always said that this creative economy project is not an arts project, it's an economic development project, right? And so it addresses the arts, and that's one component of the creative economy. And yet we've always tried to make that quantified statement as to what we add to the economy. It is the 4th largest employment sector in the capital region. It employs 36,000 people, 16,000 freelancers. That's what we're trying to say to economic development agencies, is that this is an investable sector, not just nice to have, but worthy of state investment, private investment, so that all of the people and the businesses that are in the creative economy can be seen in a different light, as something that is the part of these organizations that change towns and are part of our whole economic development strategy here. So that's been super important. Philip Morris has, been saying this for years, and Robert Altman, people have been at it for a long time, but it was really when we got the data and started driving that data that helped other people into the equation and think, we can't lose this sector because we drive $1.4 billion in earnings. You can't sneeze at that. Once we're talking billions, that's a different conversation. So.
There's no doubt the conversation has shifted drastically since the numbers came out, and it's a regular topic of conversation in media generally around here. What's your take on the Creative Capital series and what it added to the conversation?
Yeah, last year when we did our roundtable tour, which is early 2018, WMHT went full on, and they recorded every one of those conversations. They were there before me and left after me, and it was a grueling tour with 750 attendants, but really just a lot of logistics around it. And they started recording those conversations. They gave us a transcript of the conversations, which is huge. Just as a lift, you guys know this. Transcripts are fantastic.
We've been dealing with that, yeah.
For sure. So, for someone to do that for you, that's huge. But to also report back to the public on what others were saying besides me, because goodness knows that's not the point. The point is what's happening out there in the community. They helped us show that, and they used a lot of airtime. They did 30 segments, I believe, on creative economy businesses and people and stories in all 8 counties. So to have airtime against was so huge. And Matt Rogowitz was the producer of all of those spots. And so he did that creative economy step of going into people's homes and looking at their freelance business. This is what a freelancer looks like. Is it glamorous? It's someone with a cup of tea and four monitors, or something set up in their backyard. He brought people into it rather than us just talking about it. He showed it, and that was a really huge thing. The Creative Capital was the culmination of that. They wrapped up that series of aha spots with a special, and Guha Bala hosted it. So he was a really great host.
We were just talking about, Guha and his brother obviously were transformational figures for the area with first Vicarious Visions, right? And which was the Guitar Hero franchise and a number of other things. And then they Vicarious Visions was sold to Activision, which is a giant gaming monolith responsible for Call of Duty and games like that. And then they left and they founded Velen Ventures. And I know a few people who worked there. And I have to say, it's not unlike working in the clandestine services because they're not allowed to talk about what they're doing. And they've contracted with Electronic Arts, which is perhaps an even bigger gaming monolith compared to. So anyway, I mean, he's someone who is deeply invested in making sure that all of the facets of sort of training and workforce are in the region. And just thinking about the kind of people that I know that work there, whether it's designers, programmers, et cetera, it takes a wide swath of folks with different talent. And he's been committed to not only pushing the tax credit to draw people in, but sort of education. What was it like working with him, and what has your relationship been like with him, given that you're both working on these sort of similar?
Yeah, we've been, I met him when we first started doing this creative economy work because he was one of the original team, and this is going back like 6 or 7 years now. And what was really interesting about when we started that project was that a lot of us did not know each other. We didn't spend a lot of time in the room. But when they started the report, which with a consulting firm called Mount Auburn Associates, it was the first time that I had never met Philip or Robert or Guha or any of the 50 or 60 people who were gathered in that room. And that was the start of this whole movement of saying, what do we have here in these 8 counties? So Guha brought this super unique perspective, and he's kind of a superstar, you know, for Guitar Hero is a really big cultural idea. You know, it transcends gamedom. It's a giant idea. So for that guy to be living here, or Melissa Oftermauer to be living here, all the people that we didn't know were right here, you know, or hadn't met or put under this package of the power of people who live up here was super interesting. So Guha's always been a leading voice for that stuff. And to make the connection between where media and design, because that digital gaming skirts both of those and is contained in both of those sectors, to have him be able to speak to that so that someone can say that graphic designer is related to that giant company is really important for understanding the depth and breadth of the creative economy. So I think he gets to show where this can go, you know, its full potential of every one of those individuals, right? So.
Having, we've worked with Arzu Flowey, who just did a couple murals for downtown Albany and has done a cover for us, but she also has worked with them and is here because of the video game industry. So it's so interesting that her story, immigrating from Iran and going to Canada and then being drawn here by the video game industry, she brings with her not only her talents but her culture, and is an advocate for not only immigrants but for artists, and you can see how the local creative sector has changed because of the wealth of folks who have come in or who have come up and realized they have an opportunity to work in that field.
I think I'm going to interrupt you right there because I'm one of those people who moved up. I lived in Brooklyn, and I used to be, before I moved here, I was an executive producer and site director for nickjr.com, which is a giant website for little kids. And I didn't have this much potential in New York. You know, when you're stuck in a giant corporation, it is a bunch of people standing around with properties that are too valuable to do anything with. I can't tell you how little you can do with a very important property. Like, I worked on Blue's Clues and Dora the Explorer, that set. And you can't change those characters. Those Bibles are written. Those properties are worth billions of dollars. And it was actually not that exciting.
Right.
I was so disappointed. That's what I aspired to do, and I didn't realize how little opportunity you get in New York. You're stacked with lawyers from 100 steps above you to 100 steps below you. And I've been so freed up, and I think that a lot of people have said the same thing, being released from like that New York corporate thing, is that this is an amazing playing field. We can do anything here, and I didn't feel like that for one day in New York, let alone paying your rent and daycare and all those things.
And also,
it's crushing.
in roles where you can kind of like start at the bottom and learn a lot of different things, which is like where, especially like I know a lot of people my age are trying to like get in wherever they can and try to learn as many things as possible to see where they would best fit. It's a lot harder to do that in New York because you're so replaceable. There's so many people who are trying to do the same thing, and like in this area there's a lot of spaces for people to go, and like new things popping up all the time too, where people are starting their own like record companies or like design outfits or what have you. Like there's always something for somebody to try and add to.
We just spoke to Patrick Harris about the idea that, you know, his he was saying to me, you know, his family still is, you know, his parents, you know, why aren't you going to New York? And like, my friends who are there don't have that kind of opportunity that I have to build something and bring people together, and they're isolated. And I mean, that's something even that part about being isolated and just life being harder is something we've heard from Joe Mom in Nitzburg, all sorts of people who now live here but used to work in, you know, LA and New York.
Yeah, I'm a freelancer. We've run ACE entirely on freelancers to help us be reflective of our audience in one way, but also because I've fallen in love with it. I would never freelance in New York. Your rent is too much. You can't. I would never. You know, so this is one of those things that I'm afforded is an entirely different chapter of my career. It's been so interesting for me, and there's no way that if you can even have a career past 40 in New York in the entertainment industry, good luck to you. Be a woman and do that, forget it. And you know that really, I cannot say enough about this place. It's been personally really great, but I see it for people of all ages and backgrounds.
Yeah, trying to break into it is a lot, and like trying to be someone who's doing a bunch of different things as a freelancer too is like it's a little bit less challenging to like have sort of just a lot of side jobs and not one central thing, because you're not like relying on all of those things or like knowing that you have to pay this hefty fund just to exist in a space that's like looks like you are accomplishing something, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, not going to bed with a sick stomach every night has been great for me, I gotta say.
Yeah.
One of the things I talked with Patrick about in a conversation, and one of the things we're stumbling upon with our musician survey is that folks are still struggling to sort of get paid in their freelance gigs, and that you know, especially music, which I think sort of fosters that culture of you want to be a star or you want your music out there.
We
so
gave
play
you
for
the
free.
stage. What do you want?
Yeah. How do you think that could change? I mean, what do you think needs to happen to sort of change that mentality locally, or create the kind of wealth that could be passed down from, say, a bar owner to someone who's playing a gig?
Yeah, I think that education, and you guys talking about it helps, right?
Yeah.
Because I used to run an art gallery. When I first started the art gallery, I would ask people to come, my friends, to come play. And it took until someone told me about it. I wasn't being a bad person. I just didn't know as much about it.
Right.
So bringing up the topic and having people on both sides of that equation feel more comfortable about the conversation, because we're well-intentioned, right? So assume good intention for people. They do want to give you that stage for them to be able to talk about or for us to help broker that conversation about the economics of running a venue and of being a musician, both sides, right? How do you come to that? And I think just going into it with a lot of education and all of us feeling like we have a shared stake in each other's success is really important. And I don't think that's, well, I'm turning into a New York basher in my golden age, but I don't know if that's always true in New York. You know, you can just, musicians by the pound, you know, if you don't want it, there's someone else. And that's not true here. I think that we know each other and are connected to each other 3 or 4 degrees. And so I think that to sort of empower ourselves to have that conversation comfortably, keep bringing it up, right? We should always be talking about it and helping people who have run into that problem, talk it through with them and keep banging away at this. Because I think that locally we can affect that and say, we just have a best practices. And you know what we could literally do? Have the collaborative, and like we could write it up and say, these are some best practices we've seen. Yeah. Why not, right? It's from what we've learned and heard, and we would say, this is a great way to treat a freelancer. This is a great way to treat a musician. And I'd read it and follow it. I would have gladly have done that. I just didn't know. So I would draw up a manifesto.
Yeah.
We should draw up a manifesto and be like, this is
Yeah.
how to be a good person, in a creative field. I'm
Yeah.
serious.
Well, obviously there are time and places where people are more than willing to play for free,
Right.
or but for people who have just found that there's no way to do it without getting paid. I mean, it may obviously speak to the economics of running a venue, and knowing
But
that.
let's help someone understand that too on the
Yeah.
other side, right? Let's talk
Yeah.
about all of those things about the reality of that. I think it will just help everyone,
Yeah.
and maybe even just give the guidelines for a conversation so that you don't feel like you're the first person to ever ask that question.
Yeah.
So that would be helpful to
Right.
know that many of us have tread in these waters before, and not elegantly always, but
Yeah.
I mean, I do think that is particularly a problem in the arts, for folks feeling like I want attention, I want my work to get recognized, and I feel guilty because of it.
Yeah.
Right.
And you run into it a lot. And folks even not wanting to say that they're an artist, or that they're, I do this, but it's not my thing. Or it's not.
or I'm not very good.
Yeah, I'm not very
like
good.
they don't want to be held to a certain
Yeah.
point. Yeah.
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 But I feel like the creative economy conversation has changed that a bit, and that folks are more willing to come forward and say, this is what I've been working on, and share it. And you see people getting more recognition. But
Yeah, I think that the conversation that you guys just brought up extends into freelancing as well, of how to get paid on time, of how
Right.
to write a contract. All of these things are so helpful,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't know it unless someone told you about it, because there's not a guide. This is new. I went down to some freelancers union events in New York before and while we were developing the ACE series to see what they were doing, because they had their series going on for 10 years, maybe more. And there were people of all ages. I mean, 60-year-olds and 19-year-olds who were down. And I went to the topic was contracts. These people had smoking contracts. I learned so much, and it had nothing to do with age. It was just really that they had learned from each other
Right.
and shared their contracts and things. That's super
That's
powerful.
important,
You
yeah.
get your power back,
Yeah.
and you help your client understand what's a good way to treat you and what you want to know. And usually someone will follow you if you're very clear. But the clarity with which they were speaking, I was blown away. Learned so much.
the struggle in digital media, with some of my colleagues and Vice and all those things, and the wow, I'm not going to say this. Unionization, yes. And the impact it's had. I mean, these people are standing up for themselves, and it changes things. And not always for the better for them in the immediate, because they're left struggling, but these are people who then have watched them develop their own brands. And it's a
Yeah.
risky thing to do, but it takes, it seems to be rewarding.
Yeah.
Not that I would know. But so let's talk a little bit about the new events. Your first one is in Unihog in Hoosick Falls. Talk a little bit about why you chose Unihog.
Sure. Well, just to start with how we came into the road trip idea was generally because I'm on the road all the time. And so when we try to do a different county, or at least hit each county each year, and we're on our probably 36th event. It's been a lot of them. And part of the discovery of going out there is how much is in every corner of this region, right? And so I don't know that we've ever told the whole story of what happens when you create one of these events. It's sort of letting everybody in on that spirit of discovery. You were just at the Kinderhook out at the Jack Shainman Gallery. Were we blown away or what?
Oh, well, it was, yeah. I mean, it's sort of funny for me because my mother used to bring me to that town, to the rock shop that's there. It's no longer a rock shop, It was like a little it was like the little weekend trip we'd always take. And then the idea that there is this former school filled with Warhol and Basquiat was just, I mean, I would have driven. I know I drove past that place 3 or 4 times without realizing what I was driving past.
And then when you get to
yeah.
it was crazy. It was good on every level. But then when you get to the town, it's like, oh my gosh, this setting and where to eat lunch and all the story of every restaurant. It's sort of doing that, is pulling all those strings together and saying,
Yeah.
this is in our backyard. We have dozens. We could have 100 of these towns that have that kind of story surrounding them, right? And when you start talking to any of these places or venues, they've created their own communities within there that they're anxious to talk about. So it's kind of just broadening these creative economy mixer ideas, which are great. Everybody, they're going great. But why not wrap in that story of where it is? The place matters too. And so we're just broadening it out a bit to say, while you're going to Unihog, which is way out there are other things to do. If you haven't ever walked into Brown's Brewery on the Falls, have you ever been there? It's so pretty, right?
Yeah, I interviewed a couple of years ago both the founders, whose names, sorry, apologies, but I cannot believe this. I mean, it's right there. You're in the water, essentially. You're sitting on the water, and the falls are there.
What a setting.
Yeah.
So to not tell someone on the way to Unihog to go stop at Brown's is so silly, right? We should tell them what to do and how to have that experience because it's not clearly obvious. And so to have them be part of that discovery, and then we sort of build out a guide to every town that we can share with other people. And if you can't do it that night, you can go another time. But this road trip to Hoosick Falls is good for Hoosick Falls. That town has struggled a lot. They did not need a water crisis on top of the challenges that they faced before. And so there are people coming there who live there, and they're saying this is going to be great here. They're starting with locally sourced food and beers and products, and a venue that they think is about them. And it is so nice to go out there and hear their stories and take these road trips. Why not share the road trip, not just the event?
I mean, that is how I do my weekends, essentially.
Right.
Those sort of weeks. But Katie has, we have a story. It's not by Katie, but in the next issue about a coffee shop that
Sarah Heikkinen.
Yeah, Sarah about a coffee shop that has cannabinoids in there, out in Hoosick Falls.
CBD stuff.
And she'll be part of the story, right? Of where you should go. And this is something that we should make, once we have the platform set up, which we will, but to let everybody add what you should do to Hoosick Falls. So we will start a Hoosick Falls.
Like a map.
Yes. Kind of and everybody should add to it and tell their story about where to go.
The best part, I think, about learning about different spots and things that people enjoy is like the very specific things that they enjoy about each thing, because it's easy for a business to write about themselves and be like, these are all the things that we have. Like, we already, that they're trying to sell you something in a way, but it's so much more enjoyable to know this place has the best mac and cheese you'll ever eat in your entire life. That kind of thing where you're like, okay, now I have to go try this very specific thing because this person has definitely been there and enjoyed it. I think that's really valuable to describing places and giving it more of a personality than just a general description.
And adding the name of who you say hi to, right? It's so important to be able to know who the store owner is or just be greeted when you walk in. And such a different interaction when you know who's there. So just to offer that to people, I think, is the spirit of the road trip. Just broaden out, talk about the town.
Exactly.
The next one we're going to do in November is about Catskill, which is a place that I now live and I'm transitioning to, and you're from down that neck of the woods.
Yep, Germantown and Athens. That's where I grew up, right, Catskill in the middle.
And those towns have such deep and amazing offerings, and so just to let people know what's new there and what's old there,
right?
All of those things together is what. But it's so cool when you get to have Thomas Cole House and Avalon Lounge, which is a new nightclub in the same town. You're doing well then in a gorgeous setting.
Oh, Catskill has transformed so drastically. It's just. And in the span of maybe 2 years or less, because, I used to go down there all the time. And when I lived there, it was the Burger King and the movie theater were the only things there.
Was there a Burger King? I didn't know.
The Burger King has always been it was, I think the founding fathers opened a Burger King. But obviously high-low, there's a record shop, there's a bookstore. It's everything that, and more than some of the larger towns around here have in terms of the arts or things that people with that sort of tastes might want. And it's amazing to see the folks who live there now. And obviously you know a lot of them, and we've written about a few of them. But it speaks to that, obviously the the folks fleeing the city, but also folks there finally being empowered to sort of start these businesses because there are enough people there that care that there's a bookstore.
Yeah, it reminded
like daring to like do things that are like really interesting and like culturally relevant and like I don't know, just like really eccentric or different acts too that they're booking in places like Avalon and Hilo and stuff like that.
Yep, and you can't do that. You don't can't take that kind of risk in the city anymore.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you can't open
Yeah.
a weird, super weird whatever.
Right.
You can do a safe weird whatever, but you can't do what these little towns offer you, is to, sometimes when I first went to Catskill, I was walking past something, I'm like, is that a store? You couldn't quite
like,
say, that's
can't
how,
tell.
that's
The Rodney
how
shop?
weird it was. And,
That's how I felt about the Rodney shop.
I love the Rodney
What a
shop.
story.
He's such a good friend and such an amazing person.
He is.
So yes, but true. It's a different idea of a store. It's like Rodney in a place that you can go talk to. And he changed the idea of what a store is, you know, or what an artist is, or the environment you can create. But you can't do that everywhere.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
a
and
new
the-
proposition and one we've got here, only here. You know.
The idea, I mean, that he is an internationally known artist who has created these and worked with these brands that a lot of people know. And he's essentially getting by selling this stock that he gets in every once in a while from his friends in Japan, which is where it was made and the most popular. He can only do it because, I mean, if you were waiting for your stock to come into New York, you'd close. I mean, there'd be no way to keep the store open. But, when I
or even just trying to like sell it in a larger store that sells other things, like you'd have less of an ability to really curate something that.
But folks have tuned into it, and now they travel out there from everywhere because they're fans of his. And it's
It's a
pretty cool.
destination.
Yep.
Yep, for sure. And I think so many people are afforded that opportunity to decide, if I had a space, what would I do with it? They can literally try that on for size. It's amazing. So, yeah, life-changing.
And where in Catskill again?
Where am I?
No, where's the event?
Don't give out my address. Come on over.
Where's the event?
It will be at Avalon Lounge,
Avalon,
which
right.
is the Liam and Laura, the people who started Hilo, have opened a nightclub, and it's really cool inside. We will go in there. And also, it's going to be at Foreland, which is, did you see the big building that's along the waterfront? That is going to be a mixed-use building. It's going to have artist spaces, gallery, apartments, restaurant. A woman named Steph Halmos is renovating that building. It was quite an undertaking.
And that's the building that I think was owned
by Rob Kelly.
Yeah, from Etsy.
Yes,
Yep.
exactly. So there's a lot of renovation work to do, but it, again, is a transformative piece for Catskill, and it's right down the street. So we're going to do a hard hat tour at Foreland, and then we'll walk down to Avalon Lounge and do the rest. But also tell people afterwards, go to Crossroads, which is right down the street, to get a beer, and what else you can do there. So before and after. So yes, that's the spirit of the road trip thing.
Yeah, I mean, a town like Athens, which is right nearby where I grew up, the abandoned opera house that we used to bicycle around but also be scared of because there are too many dead pigeons nearby, is now the most amazing brewery. And it's amazing to see that sort of thing happen. And there's a bakery across the street, and what used to be
is there? That is the best bakery ever.
It used to be a broken down bodega who my elementary school friend's dad ran, and now it's you can get the most amazing baked goods. Yeah, my daughter and I have had a number of sit downs there.
Yeah, my daughter and myself too. Yeah, it's great there.
And the Stewart House, I don't know what's going on there now, but it's beautiful on the water and historic, and it's amazing that how much has been transformed in a few years.
And then there's all those towns. Once you start discovering Coxsackie right up the road, it has a great effect on all the rest of those pieces too, as to what can happen.
Right.
The river towns especially, it's nice to be able to travel there and see the river, as opposed to Albany where you cannot see the river.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Well, they're working on that.
they are, yeah.
We're not. Let's check back in a year, and we'll see if we can. If we are blocked from the
I'd
water.
be remiss if I didn't mention that Dominic Calzolero, friend, has been, and former councilman, has been advocating that for, I don't know, since he was elected
The
10 years ago.
787 thing?
Yeah, tear down 787. He's
Well,
been-
they're on it. People are on it.
Yeah.
So hopefully that would be an amazing
That would
piece
be
for
really
us because
cool.
we are a water setting here.
Yeah.
Right.
And
And
yet-
like when you're driving past the city, like everybody, like I think of a lot of bands that come through here, and like I have conversations with them, and they're like, we get to Albany and we're like, whoa, like this is really cool looking, like the skyline, but then you're just kind of like assaulted with all this concrete. And it's like, yeah.
We'll see what we
It
can
has a lot
do,
of potential.
Right? Yes, exactly. I'm going to use that as a really quick segue into regionalism, right? Because the waterfront's a shared proposition, and yet we have so many municipalities and so many different interests here as to how to work together is just one of those. It's one of those examples of what happens when we work together to have a vision for what that waterfront can be, because I'm going to so get the numbers wrong, but Tom Nardacci was saying the other day of how many municipalities, I think there were 7 or 8 that weigh in on just a 3-mile stretch of water, right? But you have to have this shared vision of what we can be. And that's sort of what I think the creative economy does for people, is to say, this 8 counties, it doesn't matter about county. Erase all those things, erase the borders between your towns, and take a look at what we have together, because together that's what people can see from afar, right? The rest of the towns are quite small to invest to know where to go and what to do. But if we can talk about ourselves as a region, we are competitive with any major city, if not have advantages over them. So this 1 million people that we have would make us the 14th largest city in the United States of America, and we can talk about ourselves that way, and it will be a lot easier to understand what's here if we had sort of a shared vision of what this region is, because we haven't really branded it or given it any brand attributes. As an old brander, that's the kind of thing you need to do to make something meaningful. You need to tell them what that brand means, and we don't have one here. We did last year after the Roundtable tour. We got a grant to do focus groups, online focus groups with $100,000 wage earners in New York City and Boston who were willing to relocate and did travel, a fair bit of cultural travel. And we're surrounded by regions that they knew super well. The Hudson Valley, they knew 88%, the Berkshires, 95%, Vermont, 100%, Adirondacks, 95%. Do you know what the percentage of people knew what the capital region was? And we are right in the middle. You literally have to drive through us to get to those places. Do you know what the brand awareness was for us? 30%.
Wow.
It was inflated by the fact that they thought it was Washington, D.C. we were talking about.
Oh, capital.
So we are an unbranded proposition.
Yeah.
And if we're doing this well as an unbranded proposition, can you imagine if we told people what we were about? We could watch those people while they were doing the focus groups, because we were lucky enough to do online focus groups, which is super cool. But we started telling them from this unbranded lump of clay that we were offered that they didn't know what it was. We then told them we have 125 farm-to-table restaurants, 60 breweries, 25 universities, 1 million people. You could literally watch it roll over them of what was here, and they were really surprised, and they said, oh, to quote, I will check that out. Our account manager on the project, for our focus group account manager, was so taken by what we were telling her and what we were asking people about. She came up here the next week and wrote us and said, I love it there. My husband and I are looking for a weekend house, and we're looking to move there. She had never heard of it. Right. She was in New York, right down the road. We have 40 million people within 150 miles of Albany who don't know who we are. So we're just saying, just tell them. That will help all of our businesses, all of our freelancers, all of our creative businesses, all of the traditional businesses.
Right.
This is what we are talking about on a region-wide level. Have a shared voice, a shared statement.
It's interesting because since we started the collaborative, I've gotten a few messages from folks passing through Mass MoCA who pick up the magazine and say, I love what you're trying to do, and I love hearing about all these artists and giving them a voice. But I only go to Albany for the mall, or I only stop by. Like we're in Mass MoCA because we come here all the time, and we know about the Berkshires are great, but we only head to this town if we want to go to Dave & Buster's or something. Right. I didn't know there was more, and it is interesting to have that conversation with folks. It's a train ride. It's a very lovely train ride from the city. and pretty short drive from MoCA. So it
Yep.
has been
with dozens
revelatory.
more, a multiplicative number of venues that more than the Berkshires, right? So this
Yeah,
is
that's
something
true.
because they have 130,000 people. We have 1 million
Yeah.
people with all that goes with that, right? So we should just tell our story. So there are a lot of organizations that are working together, and you got everybody
Yep.
tell this, let's have a shared voice about what we have here, because that consistency is what builds things like Nickelodeon, meaning they're so robust, those brands are so valuable, and you can't disabuse someone once they've seen that brand, they know it in their bones, right? That's what we can do here. We just haven't even started. So that's our next larger
Yeah.
initiative, but it's really worth doing.
And so for folks who want to attend this trip, the various road trips,
Yeah.
it's your site.
Yep, upstatecreative.com
Yep.
or .org, both. And they're every month. We always on a Wednesday. We just change which Wednesday, but we go
And you do
try
request
crazy
signups,
things.
right? But
We do.
But it's free.
We do, because we like to tell the venue how many people are coming. And they're getting weirdly large sometimes. So just to help the venue know, are we going to have
prepare.
rollover parking problems or things? So that's sometimes helpful for us to know beforehand. But
And folks can go to wmht.org to watch Creative Capital.
on Monday
Okay.
at 9 p.m.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have seen a couple things with saying it will be on demand or,
Yes, it will be,
so-
but there is the
Yes.
first premiere. Yes, you were totally correct.
No. I'm one of those people who no longer has TV of any sort. So yeah,
I don't
it's-
either. Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming on, and we look forward to. I'm sure we'll get to a number of those events. I've actually been trying to get friends to go to Browns and Hoosick Falls for a while now because I don't drink, but sitting in that place is
So pretty.
yeah, it's a different kind of experience. I
Yeah.
think.
Agreed. Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.
Thank you.